Thank you, Lucy, for that kind introduction. So my name is Antti Savilaakso. I'll try to give the SRI manager perspective. The perspective is a kind of a stereotypical SRI manager. He typically has an office somewhere in the European capital, works for a big bank. The big bank has a little bit smaller asset management unit, and on this tiny corner of this asset management unit, there's the SRI business unit that offers sustainable and responsible investment solutions for their clients, typically through the retail network, but also institutional investors over there. So I base on my opinions to this kind of a stereotype, which is not based on the Dexia Asset Management or any other, but rather the kind of a crosscut of all the European SRI managers that I'm familiar with. So the job of a SRI manager is to put the companies on this line of the very long line, where on the other end you have the most destructive companies, and on the very other far end you have the most sustainable companies. And this is very subjective. Every asset manager will tell you very kind words about their methodology and of their fine ways of doing different analysis for different companies and their understanding of the different phenomenon. But basically, this is where it comes down to. You need to be an SRI manager. You need to put the company on this fine line. And where the question is that where do you put palm oil? Now, I wanted to do a kind of a show of hands survey, but in the interest of times, I'm just going to use a few anecdotes. This morning on the news, I saw an economist talking about the Malaysian economy, and he pointed out 3 pockets of economic interest that helps the overall Malaysian economy. Palm oil plantation was one, which for me says that he thinks it's probably on the more sustainable end. Now, if you do a Google search, image search for companies, and you use a very neutral search terms, palm oil plantation Indonesia, what do you think comes up? There's about half of the pictures are from terrible burning forests and locked down areas of nature. There's a few pictures of orangutans, and there's a few other pictures of the guys dressed as orangutans in the Nestle headquarters. There's a few that would be genuinely be considered as a let's say neutral from a SRI perspective. Now, as an SRI manager, I'm sensitive to this opinion. Like, it doesn't really matter what kind of a scientific evidence I have to put the company on this particular point in this line. If my client thinks that it's on the other end, then I'm in trouble on arguing that. So I have to be sensitive. No matter what kind of a basis I have on it, I need to be sensitive on what happens there. And my point is that when the palm oil companies, the public perception is so wide from other end to completely to the other end, it requires an extra effort and extra openness from the company to come forward with their story. For me as an SRI manager to be able to put that there. And every consumer is very skeptical about the information that especially the scientific information that the companies give forward. SRI manager is even more suspicious about anything. If there's not information available, none of the SRI managers can assume that the company is automatically on the very sustainable end. So SRI manager needs the information, needs the openness, needs the transparency. Now, how do you do that in practice? Now, one way is to kind of there's very little of the mandatory requirement for ESG information reporting. So what you can do is that you can basically sit and wait for something to happen, an allegation to come in, to which you can then respond. Okay. To give you a context, I'll tell you a story about the France Telecom. France Telecom is the French telecom company. It's formally government owned. It has a lot of employees in France. It faces a saturated market, and it faces a competition from the recently opened telecommunication market there. Now, employees of the France Telecom have been tightly squeezed. I mean, they used to have a government contract, and they used to be in a fairly well off in working for this company. But because of the pressure of the market, they've been squeezed on terms of employment, of relocations, of different things that the management can do other than actually firing them. Now, what happened just recently, 6 months ago, was that there was a wave of suicides started to take place. There was people who committed suicide for employees there, and they leaved out notes on saying that the adverse working conditions there are the reasons for doing this. Now, this took place up to a point where one of the employees, believe it or not, carried a knife to a staff meeting and stabbed himself on the staff meeting. Now, obviously, the media started to get interested, and there started to be questions. France Telecom didn't comment anything. It took time. Then one of the managers of the France Telecom came out, gave a notice to media, said two things. First, suicide rate among France Telecom employees is less than a national average. Second, our rate of suicides is declining. Now, this is actually factually true. This is factually true. But you can imagine what the reaction is from the public. These are the takeouts from the newspaper from the following weeks. France Telecom, there's always someone at the other end of the line. France Telecom management, we thank you for taking part of our voluntary retirement program. Dubois, didn't you get the memo of the cost cutting? If you need to do this, you cannot use the company premises, you cannot use the rope, you need to go through the window. Now, my point being, again, from the SRI management perspective, is that I know that the France Telecom management did a lot of good things in order to prevent this. Like the moment that they started to happen, they did a lot of things in order to do something of this very, very adverse thing. But as long as the public perception is something like this, the SRI manager is handicapped. Now, instead of waiting for something to go wrong and taking an initiative on putting your information forward, the company can do a lot of things from the SRI manager perspective. Now, the fact is that most of the information that the SRI manager uses comes from the companies themselves. It comes from the companies themselves by the SRI manager going through their reporting, going through the cases, going through the annual reports, sustainability reports, and so on. It comes through the media, but the companies publish a lot of press releases, which ends up being in the media. It comes through the research agencies, but the research agencies also rely on the company reporting. The other fact, because there is no hardly ever mandatory requirements of you putting out of the company putting out an ESG information, he can choose. Or the company can choose what information he puts there. This is not a kind of a, or how I see it is that it's not an opportunity not to say anything, it's an opportunity to say your message and put your message through. Now, there's been a lot of good cases where this kind of a voluntary putting information as much as possible forward have come down to a very, very nice change of story, if you will. The Nike, for example, was accused of a very, very adverse labor conditions in Asia. They tried to handle the allegations for a while. After that, they put their list of suppliers available. Now the list of suppliers is available, and everybody is free to criticize that, and Nike put them on the line over there. It completely changed, from the SRI manager perspective, it completely changes the story. I mean, now it's not the company hiding of the bad things of doing. It's all up to all the rest of us to make sure that everything is okay. This is exactly the same thing has happened to a lot of other companies. Now, in practice, I think the point was iterated already earlier, that it doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't have to be a very, very difficult exercise. If the company puts the basic, unbiased, preferably reference, not necessarily, but preferably, reference information available, then the SRI manager would have some kind of a basis to build the SRI case forward with. Now, and again, it doesn't have to be the SRI manager, especially the ones sitting on the Western capital, knows a lot of things, very little of a lot of things. So just putting out the map where you put out that here would be the orangutans, here would be our palm oil plantation, would make a tremendous difference. Now, you already mentioned that the biodiesel yield of palm oil is many multiples compared to the previous ones. So why this is not available by the companies themselves? It's once you got the basic information available, you basically need to build, or every single SRI manager follows the same 3 lines of policy, management system, and performance, and so on. I mean, it would be very, very nice to have all the performance things available. But if you have your policy there, if you have a few anecdotes on what do you actually do in order to fulfill the policy that you have publicly committed, then you would be able to have some kind of a performance data available. And when the SRI manager next time goes to your website and tries to find the information and builds the SRI case on why this particular company should be within the SRI fund, he would have a much more material to build up the case. That's it. Thank you.